Certainly during the Second World War, it was 1 to at least 2 or 3,000, something in that neighborhood. And we have 44 stars. That tells you there's something radically wrong, this bureaucratic overhead. During World War II, the size of the force was usually about 12 million. Something nearing 15 to 20% of the force. Maybe he'll have something to say about where he thinks we're headed in the future regarding Europe and Asia. Because I know there's a desire to reduce our profile, particularly in Asia. There may be some announcement in connection with affirmative action, which is with cell phones that can call and tell them anything they need to know immediately. This has been the problem throughout the Ukraine war. Secondly, it presumes that we're going to have all of this equipment, particularly missiles, radars, and other things ready to go at a moment's notice. We're way behind in our production. We're not like Russia. Russia's factories are humming too with the extraordinarily excess overhead in the United States Armed Forces. I think if you go and look at the ratio of general officers.
Well, I can tell you what I know. There are 800 senior officers coming to this meeting. These are overwhelmingly 4 stars and 3 stars. And I think this has something to do with the extraordinarily excess overhead in the United States Armed Forces. I think if you go and look at the ratio of general officers to men, sailors, airmen, Marines, soldiers fighting on the field, certainly during the Second World War, it was 1 to at least 2 or 3,000 something in that neighborhood. And during the entire Second World War, at least until the end when we sort of gave people honorific promotions, you get an E extra star, thank you for coming and doing a great job kind of thing. We had only 7 4-stars. Right now we have roughly 44 stars. During World War II, the size of the force was usually about 12 million. That's 7 for 7 4-stars for 12 million. And right now, I think the force is a little over 1 million, 1.1 million, and we have 44 stars. That tells you there's something radically wrong. This bureaucratic overhead has grown to the point of absurdity. So I'm sure something in that connection will be discussed. Yeah, I'm trying to find those numbers. I was reading that same thing. That's my assumption as well. But is there any any validity to the concerns that there could be something more serious from this meeting beyond just a purge or kind of looking for more efficiency? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know what you would point to at this stage. There may be some discussion about changes in other policies. We have enormous numbers of women in the armed forces right now. That's really a serious problem for us. Something nearing 15 to 20% of the force. There's a desire to reduce that to about 5%. I've heard that number kicked around, which is probably reasonable. There may be some announcement in connection with affirmative action, which is now really no longer strictly speaking legal since the Supreme Court largely overturned it. But we continue to use it to advance non-white people, women and other non-Europeans. Is he going to talk about that? I don't know. Maybe he'll have something to say about where he thinks we're headed in the future regarding Europe and Asia, because I know there's a desire to reduce our profile, particularly in Asia. We have forces in places where they're frankly not needed, haven't been needed for 2 decades. All of that is possible. So all we can do is speculate, Mario. I don't have any firm information on that. There's one theory that these drone incursions are reconnaissance drones by Russia. I found that to be unlikely, and not sure how useful reconnaissance drones will be over Danish territory, especially now we've got satellite imagery that's pretty advanced. And they've some people are trying to link those drone incursions that we've seen over the last week to that urgent meeting by P. Hexath. I'm guessing by what you said, highly unlikely. No, I don't think that makes any sense. And remember, we had the U-2 that used to fly these missions routinely over the Soviet Union and other places back in the 1,950 seconds once we had space-based SC. Reconnaissance, surveillance, intelligence, we no longer needed that. The Russians have it as well. They can find and see virtually everything of importance. The other thing is the Russians have thousands of people on the ground, particularly in Eastern Europe, with cell phones that can call and tell them anything they need to know immediately. I mean, this has been the problem throughout the Ukraine war. Thousands of Russian agents on the ground in Western Ukraine. So I don't think any of that is serious. The biggest story and something you covered in your post is the meeting with Zelensky yesterday. Trump put out a post. He said the following: after getting to know and fully understand the Ukraine-Russia military and economic situation, and after seeing the economic trouble it is causing Russia, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form. With time, patience, and the financial support of Europe, and in particular NATO, the original borders from where this war started is very much an option. Why not? Massive shift. Now, I do understand Trump's strategy is to always speak a big game. Does not mean that you know what he's saying is something he genuinely believes, that it is realistic, but one cannot deny it is a pretty significant shift in his strategy. What was your initial reaction when you saw this? Well, two things. First of all, he's now made the transformation from being Donald Trump to Joe Biden number 2. That's the first part. Joe Biden never knew what was going on either. I'm not sure President Trump does. He certainly never looked carefully into the war that was ongoing and how it got started and why. I think this is also an abdication on his part of leadership. Here's the President of the United States, who is supposed to be leading NATO, and he has said, look, we'll sell you all the equipment you need. Well, first of all, that presumes Europeans can afford to buy it. That's not exactly clear right now. They've got serious fiscal constraints on them. Secondly, it presumes that we're going to have all of this equipment, particularly missiles, radars, and other things, ready to go at a moment's notice. We're way behind in our production. We're not like Russia. Russia's factories are humming. They have an excess of equipment and capability, frankly, that we don't possess. And then finally, he's saying, I've decided to sit this out. This is your war. You can do what you want with this, and we wish you all the best. Good luck. This is the man who claims to be the leader of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. More than 32 members. The world is de-dollarizing. We're not in a healthy position to fight. And our armed forces are remarkably small for all of the missions all over the world that they've been assigned. And the armed forces we have are legacy forces. They're a tribute to the Second World War. The forces we would face are very different. They're contemporaneous. Everybody saw these new weapon systems rolling around in Beijing. We're watching new weapon systems that the Russians are employing in Ukraine. They employed something called a flamethrower. It's not really a flamethrower. It's a kind of rocket artillery with thermobaric warheads. And that thing devastated the central headquarters inside Western Ukraine that guides all of the drones and rockets and missiles. It was obliterated in 15 minutes by this massive attack from these weapons. We don't have anything like that. We're not even close. So the point is, somebody needs to get in the big picture. A certain amount of humility right now would do us a lot of good on the world stage. Two things, sir. First, when I say this, people say, "Oh, you're some Withdrawal, some Putin fan." Putin has a countenance. I'm sorry, a demeanor, a mien that he exudes, which is completely scary. But when the B-2 or whatever the bomber flew over, they said, "Did you see the look on his face?" I said, "What, you don't think he's ever seen?" He knows about this. He just looked up because he heard a noise and he said, "Oh, and they've got hypersonic." But yet our media said, boy, the way they flew over it, that was perfect. And that's the first thing which you can comment on. And the second, before I forget, what did you think about us blowing a ship out of the water with from Venezuela because it's TVA associate, and we're like, again, this psychosexual fetish about this. Anyway, any order you want, sir. Well, or neither. The thing I would say about the meeting in Alaska is that I think it turned into, tragically, a large nothing burger. It was another episode in Donald Trump reality TV, and it was the ideal Trump event because he got to posture as the great man who commands this great arsenal. The Russians know what we have. The Russians are not afraid. We need to understand that they are not afraid or intimidated. And Putin looked up and he smiled. You know, who are we kidding? We're kidding ourselves. So Trump thought he was going to stage something and that the power of his personality was going to overwhelm Putin. I've sat and listened to Putin for 3 hours with simultaneous translation talk about a whole range of subjects involving Russia, international relations, economics, industrial policy, scientific development. You go down the list. General health and welfare of the Russian people, education, all without notes. The man is brilliant, and he answered questions in an open forum, and the people asking the questions were in many cases foreign. Nobody was rehearsing anything. He just took the questions and answered them. He's a very formidable person. Now you can stand around and you can say, well, I don't like him. He was KGB or something. Okay? You know, that's like saying, I don't like your FBI because he was in the FBI or something. And they call him a war criminal. I listened to this man, Meritz in Berlin, said, well, he's vicious. There's no evidence for any of that crap. And saying that is so destructive and so unnecessary. I mean, clearly Stalin, probably the world's greatest mass murderer after Mao, killed 20 to 25 million, maybe more of his own population, long before the Second World War broke out. And without him, there would have been no Second World War because he signed the deal with Hitler, gave Hitler everything he needed to attack the West. He thought he was smart, that Hitler would get bogged down in a long war with France and Britain. Well, he was wrong. But the point is that we did business with him. We harbored no illusions about him. And there's a certain thing in public, particularly in international relations, that says you behave politely, you treat people with respect. Putin has always done that. He's never treated anybody badly. Yet, he's had buckets of filth and abuse all over him. None of this is helpful. And it's not helpful for President Trump to now say publicly, my goal is to collapse the Russian economy. What is he, crazy? It's not going to happen. I mean, these people are almost invulnerable, invincible, immune to these things. The biggest problem with Russia that we missed is that how do you defeat a country not just on the basis of its size, but look at the resources at its disposal? Mineral resources, energy resources, grain, wheat, food. I mean, quite frankly, you can close all the borders and the Russians are going to survive. But now they don't have to do that because they have friends on their borders that are going to help them and work with them and buy from them. India, China, two of the biggest countries in the world. Shouldn't we be a little concerned about developing a rapport and a relationship? Two countries in the world who have populations over 2 billion. I mean, this doesn't make any sense to me. You look at BRICS. I hate BRICS. I'm going to crush BRICS. They already represent 40 to 50% of the world. And the SEO recently, you look at these cable news, they never talked about it. And my question also serve very quickly in the waning moments here, in deference to your time schedule, Venezuela. You know, there was put it this way, the great Gerald Senti one time said, What would be the chances of our invading Iraq if their main export was broccoli? And so it just so happens that Venezuela is this font of oil minerals. It is a treasure. And we just so have, oh, and it's Awa TDA, and that's going to be our entree. That's going to be the protextual. And let us see this night vision goggle. That disgusted me. Is there something wrong with me, sir, where I don't glee like a little boy and say, ooh, bombs, what is the matter? How do we look to the world? What if Putin did this? If Putin gathered people around and said, hey, watch this, keep an eye on, we would say, you savage when we do it. Well, from the vantage point of the rest of the world, we have become patient zero. We're at the end of the hospital hallway in our own room. Everyone is working to stay away from us. Nobody wants to contract our diseases. And right now, that's why everybody wants to get rid of the dollar, because the dollar simply exports our debt to others. It's easier to do business in other currencies and other ways. We've brought this on ourselves. But as far as Venezuela is concerned, there was a tweet earlier today. I don't have it in front of me, but he was talking about the fact that the Chinese are signing an agreement with the Venezuelans to buy 60% of their oil and gas, in return for which the Chinese will go in there and repair the oil and gas infrastructure, which is in poor condition. Now, there are other things involved. They also have gold. They have emeralds. I mean, obviously, these are all important things, and we're angry over that. Well, nobody ever bothered to bring up the possibility that, we could have offered that deal. We could have said to Maduro, look, Hugo Chavez is gone now. You're the new man in town. We know that things are hard in Venezuela. The economy is poor. There are people scratching a living out of garbage cans in your streets. So why don't you do the following? We'll come down with engineers and technicians. They need about, I think the last count was about 1,600. We'll send them down there. We'll repair all the gas and oil infrastructure, but we'd like a couple of things. First of all, we know your main export is not drugs. In fact, very few illicit drugs come out of Venezuela. And the ones that do come out of Colombia, but there are some generals in the Venezuelan army who are profiting, lining their pockets by transporting drugs through Venezuela and out of the country. We'd like that to stop, and we'll help you get rid of them if you want. Because right now, the truth is that just like the president of Mexico has no control over the Mexican army, the drug cartels control the Mexican army. The same thing is true down in Venezuela. The generals aren't very responsive to Maduro. He doesn't really control them. So we could say we can help you with that, we can help you with the gas and so forth, but we want to deal with you in order to profit from your oil and gas. We'll buy it. And there may be some other things where we can do business, but we've taken the position, no, he's not a liberal Democrat. We think he's really a communist, and he deals in drugs. No, he doesn't. That's not his activity at all. That's a lot of nonsense. In other words, we're turning him into another Saddam Hussein. And then President Trump says, this is not about regime change. And I said, well, that's wonderful. Well, if it isn't, then we don't need to go, do we? We can do business with Maduro. In other words, we got to get out of this business of saying either you have a society and a government that we approve of, or we don't do business with you. But what are you going to do with Lindsey Graham? What are you going to do with I? And we have not mentioned anything about the Middle East. We haven't even touched that one. But final point, sir. I'm here in New York City, and we have somebody who is going to be the next mayor. And I hear people say he's a socialist, he's a Marxist, he's a communist, he's a this and that. And they couldn't define socialism if they bit him on the R's. And so not only what you must do, I hope in your Russell tribunalesque movements and these wonderful events, which, by the way, I'm putting up the national conversation with Colonel Douglas Macgregor, October the 4th in Dallas. There was a time, sir, I remember where we had this class called civics, and it was mandatory, and they had told me communism is this, socialism is this, Marxist. I have friends of mine who were socialists, and one, I think, a full-blown commie, but he says, I'm not a member, and they are insulted that you would dare take this welfare state charlatan. So we don't even know what Maduro is, what Bizoran Mandani is. We don't know the rudiments of socialism from a hole in the ground at so many levels. Sir, you name it. Our intellectual, educational infrastructure, we are devoid of the, I don't know how you, here, a couple of quick observations. Number one, we shut down general immigration in 1924. We stopped it because we said we were not getting the people we wanted. But we passed a new act. It was called the Exceptional Skills Act. And it said, if there are people out there who bring extraordinary expertise, competence to the country, we will consider them for entry into the United States. That's how we got Albert Einstein. Now, he's the tip of the iceberg, because a lot of other very talented people, like Albert Einstein, came into the country until we reopened general immigration after World War II. If you don't like the mayor of New York City, who's responsible for his admission to the United States? Who developed, but the point is, who developed the guidelines for the immigration? People complain to me all the time, said, well, there are now more Muslims than Jews in America. I said, and your point? Said, well, this is dangerous. And they go down this list. Said, you voted for the people in Congress. They opened immigration to all of these people. I heard no one stand up over the last 50 years and say, we need to re-examine what we're doing. We need to look at these people. Somebody said to me, are you opposed to Mexican immigration? I said, of course not, but you sound like you're uncomfortable with open immigration. And I said, well, I'd like to have all the Mexicans that have degrees in applied mathematics, engineering, and science who also speak English. Well, don't you think that's unreasonable? I said, no, not at all. Not in the world today. There are more people in China who speak English than live in the United States. And I don't want to bring up Operation Paperclip, which is another thing, but sometimes we've learned that you're going to kind of say, do we want this raw talent? And let me just leave you with this one thing, sir, which is, I think, the hottest issue. We are politically schizophrenic. We had this young, beautiful, young Ukrainian girl who is trying to seek the American dream, who's sitting there doing nothing. And this American man, not somebody, decides to ambush her, bushwhack her, slice her, gut her, and caught on video. And yet, you would think she's Ukrainian. We're going to run. The media are silent. And I don't want to get into a racial thing. Maybe that's not here. But, and I know what this is about. I will leave you with this, sir. What is the best part about America right now? What are we really good at? Whether from Trump, local, domestic, what are we excelling at? What? I don't know. Well, remember the person that committed that crime had been arrested 14 times, and now they call him homeless. He's also homeless, witless, toothless, and worthless. What do we do well? Well, potentially we do two things very, very well. Energy and agriculture. Now, I don't think we do them well enough. We have a third of the oil rigs operating today that we had 10 years ago. There are a lot of problems in the energy sector that have occurred over many years because of the damage many administrations did to energy, not just, by the way, oil and gas, also coal and other things. We have rare earths, enormous quantities in Canada, and we have them in the United States. We have never built a rare earth refinery. So if we extract any rare earths, we have to ship that to China to be refined, or we can send it to Kazakhstan where there's a rare earth refinery. So what I'm trying to tell you is that this organization called Congress has been on its ass for decades, busy counting its money, figuring out how to make themselves rich while the rest of the country was neglected. Now, the third thing that we used to do very well was high-end manufacturing. But here's the other aspect of the problem. When the gentleman that owns the microcircuitry factory in Taiwan that everybody obsesses over, because both the Chinese, the Koreans, the Japanese, and we all buy the microcircuitry that comes out of this factory, President Trump in his first term tried to persuade the owner to build a factory in Arizona or Nevada, somewhere in there. Good idea. Ultimately, it never happened. He left office, the whole thing fell apart. But more important, the owner said something privately that should concern all of us. He said, "You don't have the human capital that you need to man this manufacturing base.